And that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by political commentator Benedict Spence and journalist and author Christina Patterson. Welcome both. Among the stories we will be discussing, this on the front of the Times. The Southport stabbings families were looking for light in the darkness. We'll be right back.
It's like a football final with only one team on the pitch. This isn't just a call to vote, but a call to remember. The freedom fought for by the African National Congress.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa.
A cyclone and 2 burst dams wiped out hundreds of generational homes.
This was the second dam that the floodwaters hit before it tore into Derna. We are in the heart of Nairobi, and we're watching as protesters were heavily tear gassed.
The sheer fearlessness and persistence of these guys is astonishing.
We help you understand the world with us. I remember going into the iconic Durman market in the heart of Sudan's capital for the first time since the war started. And this is what's left of it. Bullet holes through buildings, shelled balconies, bullet cases on the floor. I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories and the lives of millions of people. This is insane. This was a bustling residential area. So many friends who lived here. My most memorable interview was with a 15-year-old boy who'd survived being stranded on a migrant boat on its way from Senegal to the Canary Islands.
After 13 days, our food, water and fuel supply ran out.
I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
They call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky News.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave!
For many people, Harvey is far from over.
People here believe the water will be this deep for weeks.
I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's chief North of England correspondent.
Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Sky News, the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people.
Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. 3 Israeli hostages have been freed by Hamas and over 180 Palestinian prisoners released by Israel, as local reports say Benjamin Netanyahu has sent a delegation to Qatar for Phase 2 ceasefire talks. The parents of 2 of the Southport victims have described their sense of loss as they back calls for a public inquiry. And the Duchess of Sussex has joined her husband at the Invictus Games in Canada. The Games, established by Prince Harry in 2014, are being held in Vancouver. Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with political commentator Benedict Spence and the journalist and author Christina Patterson. Great to see you both. Let's see what is on some of those front pages now. Well, the Sunday Telegraph leads with a story about Health Minister Andrew Gwynn, who's been sacked after saying he hoped a pensioner who did not vote for Labour at the election would die. The Mail on Sunday also reports on the story about Gwynn's Hope You Die jibe about a pensioner, calling the messages a damning dossier of vile WhatsApps. The Observer leads with Labour's plan to fix the benefit system to get people back into work. The Sunday Express reports on the Tories' call for a pact with Reform UK to beat Labour in the next general election. The Sunday Times features the first emotional interview with the parents of two of the three young girls killed in the Southport stabbings last summer. The Sunday Mirror also reports on the parents speaking out for the first time since the attacks and recalling the horror of the day their daughters died. The Sunday People also leads with the tributes from the parents of the Southport stabbing victims. The Sun on Sunday takes a different angle on the Southport victims with an exclusive interview with a man who confronted the knife attacker, who says the horror will live with me forever. And the Star reports this February will be the coldest for 6 years, thanks to a cold front sweeping across the North Sea. And we are joined by Christina and Benedict. Great to have you, as always, here on a Saturday night. Let's start with, there's two main stories, obviously. The interview with the parents of two of the Southport stabbing victims, but also that hostage release that we saw, the fifth now, as part of the ceasefire deal. So if we go to the Observer, on the front page there, very striking picture. A Palestinian girl stands among Hamas fighters at yesterday's handover of the three hostages in Gaza. Christina, if I can start with you. I mean, Hamas, we've seen them do it for every hostage exchange. They really make the most of having the spotlight.
Yeah, they turn it into major theatre, and that it's so striking, that photo of that little girl, and it makes one think of the thousands of tens of thousands of children who've died during this war, obviously, which started with 1,200 Israelis murdered brutally, and how it has escalated into this mass murder, essentially, something that does look rather like genocide in Gaza. And today clearly was a good day for the families of the hostages who were released, but tragically, one of them, Eli Shariabi, he was filmed earlier talking about how much he was looking forward to seeing his wife and children who were killed in that Hamas attack on 7th of October. So the sort of sadness and tragedy goes on and on and on. And there's been comment from many people that the Israeli hostages look very thin, and they do. It doesn't look as if they've been terribly well treated, but the same can be said of many of the Palestinian hostages. And I think, all of this is utterly tragic and made a million times more tragic by Donald Trump's comments this week, which clearly are unlikely to help any ceasefire deal and unlikely to help any moves towards a two-state solution. So the whole thing is just heartbreaking.
I mean, you mentioned Eli Shirabi, and obviously his wife was Bristol-born, and she was murdered along with their two daughters on October 7th. And just to add, obviously, the Israelis deny the allegation of genocide, although, they have been accused of war crimes by the International Court. What do you make of the impact that this might have on the second phase of the hostage deal? We're hearing the Israelis have sent a delegation to Qatar.
The second phase of the hostage deal, of the ceasefire, for as long as Hamas has hostages, it has a form of leverage. And I think that what Hamas will fear in the coming weeks and months is a loss of influence and power in Gaza. One thing that we have to say is, as much as they are sort of demonstrating strength by sort of turning out, and they're putting back on their military uniforms now that they aren't allowed to be shot at by the Israelis. They're brave enough to not dress as civilians now. They have been decimated. There's no question about that. The Israeli campaign has been brutally effective in rooting out the high command of Hamas and taking out great swathes of the ground personnel as well. So there are questions actually about the degree to which Hamas is going to be able to maintain control in the Gaza Strip. And of course, that will be, the spotlight will really be on that, of course, if the United States does decide to press on with any kind of deal, or indeed if it decides to outsource that to maybe the Gulf Cooperation Council, or indeed if the Israelis decide to go back in at a later stage, because perhaps this all falls to pieces. Because let's be clear, this is not a peace deal. This is a temporary pause. Israel still holds the upper hand. If the Israelis decide that they would actually quite like to go back into Gaza, they can do that. They can operate more or less with impunity. That is why a ceasefire was able to be agreed, because Hamas had taken such major losses. So that, I think, is going to be the crux of all of this, is that Hamas has one thing really going for it, and that is hostages. At no stage throughout any of this conflict was there any suggestion that any other country would actually come to its aid. Iran fired missiles from afar. It was never actually going to put boots on the ground. None of the other Arab countries were ever going to go to war with Israel. They didn't even sever their diplomatic ties, the ones that had established them with Israel. So that's all that they've got left. We see this sort of drip feed of hostages being released. I suspect not all of them will be, though, because there will be that desire to hold on to a sort of a very priceless and very small bargaining chip at the end of this.
I mean, it was interesting as well. I mean, the hostages that were released today looked incredibly weak, emaciated. Gal Hirsch, who is the hostage coordinator, Benjamin Netanyahu's hostage coordinator, did condemn Hamas for the physical condition of the hostages. And talking about Trump, he said on Friday, there is no rush to implement his plan for Gaza. So that's what he mentioned about the whole thing. He said, well, I mean, we'll see
having
how all of that
having
develops.
blown up decades of Middle East so-called diplomacy with a completely wacko desire to invade, take over another country that has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with you, but is only the latest in a long list, so...
We'll see how all of that develops. But certainly, you know, a lot of the families of the hostages in Israel really care about, obviously, the second phase and the release of the remaining hostages. Let's go to the Times now. Front page. Now, they have an exclusive interview with the parents of two of the three little girls that were murdered in Southport in July. The parents of B.B. King and Elsie Dot. Very moving interview. I mean, it's interesting. These are new pictures, but we're so used to seeing the pictures that we've been seeing, heartbreaking, of the two little girls. And in this interview, Benedict, the parents really, I guess, want to tell us how special their little girls, they're humanized them.
And that's entirely understandable, because a lot of the fixation of this story has been on the murderer in question. And that is very often the case, because there is that sort of fascination both with the macabre and the horror and the sort of the trying to come to terms and understanding how somebody could commit something so awful. And then, of course, there is the fixation on the awfulness of the acts themselves. Very often the victims do get forgotten in sort of the melee, because that's where a lot of the emphasis goes. So it's understandable, therefore, why parents would want to perhaps turn the attention back to their children, to the victims, and want to talk about not the horror that befell them, but actually the rest of their lives, because they were alive for a period of time and they achieved things and they did things and they were known to people beyond simply this story. So understandable, I think, and after everything that's happened, perhaps a good note to end on for those to perhaps provide some sort of clarity, some sort of positivity, beyond simply their children being part of a horror story, is that actually we get to focus on their lives. They have some criticisms as well for how things were handled, but also a lot of praise. You know, for instance, staff at Alderhay, police, Merseyside police, that sort of thing. So there is, you know, there's two sides to the story there. It's not simply negativity.
The criticism was about the televising of the sentencing, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I think there's always that. It's very difficult because obviously Axel Rüdiger-Bana was, you know, a very, very troubled and, you know, people have said evil person, and clearly what he did was absolutely horrific. I think it would be very hard to say, oh, please, let's not talk about the murderer in these situations, because, of course, you will. You know, when someone does something as horrific as that, there is an interest in his sentencing, but I completely understand the impulse of the parents, and it's just heartbreaking, the interviews they've given. The parents of Elsie, for example, talked about how incredibly loving and sweet she was. And when her father lost his mother, she wanted to support her father, this little girl. She wanted to go running with her father to support him through his bereavement, which is just a heartbreaking note in all of this. So I'm glad that the Sunday Times has put photos of 2 of these little girls on the front page. And I hope for the parents' sake that some of these details of their beautiful children do get lodged in the public consciousness, because that's obviously what they want people to remember.
It's a very touching read. Let's go to the Telegraph now on the front page. And this is Andrew Gwynn, a health minister, sacked for saying pensioners should die. This comments made on a WhatsApp group that he obviously regrets.
Yeah, not all pensioners, just one pensioner in particular. Perhaps that makes it even worse that he's singled out an individual pensioner. But this was in response to a pensioner complaining about their bin service and pointing out that they hadn't voted for the Labour Party at the local elections, to which the response was, well, thanks for nothing, basically, and we hope you croak before the next elections. There is a slew of messages in a WhatsApp chat. And, you know, it's dreadful, of course, that MPs are saying things about people, but it's more the stupidity that I find the really sort of demoralising thing. It's not so much that people might crack bad jokes, it's the fact that you are a public official, an MP, and you think you can put this sort of into a domain. It's not just 1 or 2 people in this WhatsApp chat, there's quite a large one. And you just think, you know, did you just think it would be fine, that nobody would notice that this would be all
a
about?
WhatsApp group for Labour Party figures in his local areas.
Yeah. And of course, given that this is a Labour Party story, there is also the odd sprinkling of anti-Semitism, there's the odd bit of sexism as well. You know, they've covered all bases. There's a Mossad reference, there's talk about sex acts. It's sort of very classy stuff.
Well, and making extremely unpleasant comments about Angela Rayner, which are, well, I won't go into what they are, but, you know, kind of sexual assumptions, just deeply repellent, totally repellent. And I have to say, apart from anything else, I mean, I agree with you, Benedict, about the stupidity. How on earth could you put that stuff in writing, if you even thought that? But given that everybody is always wanting more devolution, the idea that local officials should be, I mean, the word mediocrity would be far too kind to them. Absolutely thick as, well, I won't even say thick as what.
And also the entitlement.
Horrific.
The entitlement of going, well, thanks for nothing, we don't care that you didn't vote for us.
Horrific.
I mean, we're showing this Sunday Telegraph. It's actually a Mail on Sunday story. Very briefly to both of you, how damaging do you think this is for the government, Benedict?
I mean, I don't think that this is going to be the thing that sort of holds the government feet to the fire. There's plenty of other things going on. It's more, I think, that general sort of sense of Labour decided they were going to go in for the line of, we are the adults, we're going to be back in charge. Here's an example of us behaving much as actually a lot of MPs have always behaved, with complete contempt for the electorate.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think this is a Labour or Tory issue. Of course, these things are always politicised. It's a stupid human being issue, and there do seem to be an awful lot of them around.
Christina, Benedict, stay with us. Coming up, we'll tell you why some Tories might be calling for a pact with Reform UK.
We're going to do this 100 times every day for the next 3 months.
Why have we agreed to this?
Raises many questions about many things.
Actually seeing people impacted. She was so upset.
It was powerful. They kind of couldn't believe they were being berated here.
Very much on my terms, I think was the subtext. News happens fast around Donald Trump.
It was a kind of wow moment.
Yeah, that's what it feels like, doesn't it?
It's Trump world, and we just live in it.
So, where next?
Follow Trump 100 wherever you get your podcasts.
The judge made it very clear that she could see no justifiable reason why Sakulas wasn't here facing British justice.
I promised I would get him justice.
Sky News gets the full story first. It's legal to let go.
Set the speed and take the hands off.
I'm Lisa Dowd and I'm Sky's Midlands correspondent.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
The Premier League is exclusively on Peacock. Two of the league's biggest clubs find themselves at the wrong end of the table.
And the mood turns extremely sour.
Desperately chasing a win to turn their season around.
It's a beautiful finish.
Tottenham Hotspur.
To Eriksen. Back towards Amma.
Manchester United. This is the Premier League. February 16, only on Peacock.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free, wherever you get your news. The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave!
For many people, Harvey is far from over.
People here believe the water will be this deep for weeks.
I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's chief North of England correspondent.
Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Sky News, the full story first.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me now, Christina Patterson and Benedict Spence. Let's go straight to the Sunday Express. And their front page here, Tories call for reform pact to save UK. Benedict, I'm going to start with you here because obviously we've had opinion polls that now show reform ahead of all the other parties. So what do you make of this article and the possibility of, I guess, I don't know, a union, a coalition between Reform and the Tories?
This is Lord McKinley, and of course we've had these things before. I think, is it Jacob Rees-Mogg has previously said that he thinks there should be some sort of non-aggression pact between Conservatives and Reform, and I tell you what, it doesn't look particularly good if you're a Conservative and you're coming out and saying, oh, we should do a deal, because that sort of suggests that you're running scared. And I think that there's
are they
a
running
lot
scared, do you think?
I suspect they probably are, because, well, two things, actually. Reform only seems to have two policies, which is lower immigration and lower taxes. And that's going absolute gangbusters because they are polling ahead of everybody else, but nobody seems to know really what the Tories are. And when they float ideas, people go, oh, well, that's a nice idea. How long are you in government for? Why didn't you do it then? And so it's rather difficult for them to cut through. They are going down in the polls as much as Reform are actually rising. I think that's a key thing. Kemi Badenoch is not really inspiring an awful lot of confidence amongst the rank and file. And I think it is, unless something changes, there is still obviously a lot of time until the next general election, but unless something changes pretty soon, it does look as though Reform could actually sort of seize on a lot of the airwaves as much as anything else. They're not the opposition, as much as they like to sort of joke about being the opposition. They don't have that position, but they are getting a lot more airtime. People are listening, I think, more to what their MPs have to say. And again, largely that is because people are fed up of the Conservatives. It's not simply because Reform are doing any well. So you're going to hear a lot more of this. But I think as much as there are people who would like that, there are also Conservatives who would rather lose a general election than see Nigel Farage actually get any kind of amount of power. And frankly, I think a lot of Reform voters would not thank the party if it then said, yeah, we're going to do a deal with these people who you feel betrayed you.
Christina, briefly.
Well, I think that Reform have no policies at all except being anti-everything. They've said, Nigel Farage this week, when he was pressed about, because they're now, of course, they're saying that Brexit was a failure because they've seen that public opinion has turned massively against it. But he can't find a single way in which it has failed. They have no policies, they have no ideas. But yes, the Tories are terrified and Labour are terrified as well because Reform has outstripped both Labour and Tories in a number of polls this week. So, yeah, I mean, Farage doesn't have to say anything. And he has his own broadcasting channel on GB News. So, and he's very big on TikTok. So I think it's an alarming time for British politics. I think the Tories have got they're not doing well, but I mean, they created the mess that we're currently in. And for Kemi Badenoch to talk about immigration and how, we need to be tougher on immigration now, when it was under her government that it went up 3 times in a few years, is somewhat rich.
Going to have to move on quickly. We don't have a lot of time. Front page of the Sunday Times, speaking of Labour, Keir Starmer asked civil service head to quash a BBC story, the story about Sue Gray being paid more than him.
Yeah, this is an extract from the book Get In, which is all about how Keir Starmer has become Prime Minister, and this is the idea that the PM asked Simon Case, the Cabinet Secretary, to try to have this story squashed. He went to Tim Davie, the Director General, and he went to Chris Mason, the BBC's chief political editor, and they ran the story anyway. The idea being they didn't want this in the public domain because they thought it would set the wrong precedent, that it was, the idea that an advisor could earn more than the Prime Minister might give the impression that she had a slightly outsized role, which elsewhere in the book actually does suggest, I think Morgan McSweeney says, that Keir Starmer isn't actually in charge of the government and that Sue Gray had more influence. So you can imagine why they wouldn't want that impression being given.
We've got 30 seconds on the whole programme, so we can't talk about any detail. Let me just pull up the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. Trump, I will not deport Prince Harry. And we will talk about that in the 11:30 press preview because we just haven't got the time. But that's the headline. Christina, Benedict, thank you both so much. And that's it for now, but stay with us. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, 3 more Israeli hostages are freed by Hamas and 183 Palestinians are released by Israel under the Gaza ceasefire agreement.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks. I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.